Becky, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
very much.
thank you very much for jumping on. Becky, you are a divorce strategist. Fascinating.
Yes.
What
Yes, very fascinating.
Very fascinating. Yeah. What have you come to learn about divorce through your work?
Well, I had to kind of back up a little bit. I'm actually been divorced twice. And I say I'm very happily married now. I never thought I'd get married again. However, my first divorce was very, very simple. We didn't even see any kind of a judge or anything like that. The second divorce, I ended up in a 3.5 year battle in the court system, 21 hearings and 21 subpoenas.
Wow.
And he spent over $150,000 fighting me in the court. So a lot of people go, well, why in the world did you go through that? So what I learned is, and when I first started, I knew nothing about the court system, nothing. Like I didn't even know if I could fill out the divorce papers myself. Um, my former husband and I had moved to Hawaii. He had gotten a job there. I knew only two people on the island when I moved there. And 4 months after moving there, he ended up threatening divorce because I would not sign a fraudulent tax return. Now, there's more to that story, of course, but that was kind of the linchpin. And then right after that, he said, I'm having a really hard time seeing the value that you bring to my life. Um, and my response to him was, well, here's the good news is I know the value that I bring to your life. Whether you choose to see it or not is none of my business. And that literally started a very long, drawn out battle in the court system. And interesting enough is while I was going through that divorce, I was getting my degree, my bachelor's degree in conflict resolution and peace building. Like, like that's pretty comical. However, it helped me literally come through that divorce better, not bitter. And I know that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but I knew at the time when I was going through the divorce, one of the things I said to my mom is, I know I'm going through this for a much bigger reason than just my divorce. And I started writing a book called Divorcing Strong. I then met my husband now, and he was like, I don't want you in the divorce industry. But he also was disadvantaged in his divorce. His wife left him with 21 cents in the bank after 27.5 year marriage. And he was devastated. And here I fought for 3.5 years for my rights. And I came and met him and he didn't fight at all. I was like, he's like, but Becky, I wouldn't have ever met you. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. However, it's not just women that are disadvantaged through the court system and divorce. Men are also disadvantaged. And I've seen this happen multiple times for people. But what have I learned, you asked, is that um, I'm really not for divorce. However, when it does hit, you literally have to be ready and do what you can to educate yourself on your rights, or you're going to get caught with your pants down, so to speak, financially. And the statistic for women, at least, is 44% of women coming out of divorce end up in poverty. And
Wow. Yeah.
that should not happen. They just don't know their rights. Most people don't know their rights. So being a strategist, divorce strategist, every situation is different. I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice. However, I can look at a situation and be like, okay, this is what I would suggest. This is from my personal experience. Um, Take it or leave it, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but it's been a real joy. It's a heavy space, to be honest with you. It's a heavy space to work with people, but it's rewarding for me to know, hey, if I can at least get you started in the right direction, you're going to end up in a much more powerful place.
Yeah. And why do you think people aren't really too equipped to stick it out for the long haul? You know, you say your vows for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, till death do us part. What do you think it is, and why aren't people sticking it out?
Well, that's an interesting thing because there's a lot of factors. Um, I mean, there's one thing that is being thrown around a lot is narcissism. And I remember when people would always, because I've been a life coach for 15 years. I lost 130 pounds 15 years ago, which kind of catapulted me into the radio, TV, public speaking world, coaching. And people would always say to me, I got divorced because of narcissism. I was married to a narcissist. And I was like, whatever, like that's ridiculous. Um, and it was ridiculous until I experienced it myself. And I don't know if it's societal like changes where Facebook and all this me kind of stuff is coming about that's causing a lot of this to happen, or mental illness, or there's a lot of different things. But narcissism is a big one, is a big one. The other thing I think is interesting, as I've studied conflict resolution and peace building in college, it really dawned on me, having gone through 2 divorces, I realized that the inability that people have, divorce really is a byproduct of 2 people not being willing. Willingness is really where it is, not being willing and able to resolve an unresolved concern or conflict. So the conflict happens and they don't have the tools and abilities to communicate through that. I mean, one of the reasons why, to be honest with you, I'm with my husband now is because he said to me, divorce is not an option, Becky. I will do anything and everything. I will not get divorced again. I'm like, I'm in. Like, you're willing to work on it? Like, stick it out. No relationship is perfect. And being able to love each other through those imperfections, and being able to, as I say, kind of be like a tree that's be flexible when that person is not perfect, because you're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be perfect. But our society is such a throwaway society. And that's what people are thinking, that you can throw away relation. And it's hard to watch people that have built families, my husband, 4 kids and a family in this 27 and a half year marriage. And she just walks away. It's like, what are you thinking? You know?
Yeah, it is. It's heartbreaking. And my uncle who lives in America as well, he's going through a terrible divorce too.
Yeah.
And it can just financially wreck people. It
Mm-hmm.
really can. And what have you found out about that? Like, who tends to suffer the most? I mean, we're not sort of waving the victimhood points,
Right.
but what have you found out about, with alimony and child support, in particular with men and all that sort of stuff? What have you found out about that?
Well, again, it's understanding what the law is. Okay. So some people don't realize that when you get married, it is you enter into a contract, and it is a financial contract. So there is this mentality sometimes that men think, hey, I'm going out and I'm financially taking care of our family. The woman typically stays home, right? And take care of the kids, but she puts her career on hold for that. And so some men feel like, hey, that's not as much, you're not as worth as much as I am. But when you go into businesses together, when you have um, assets that increase, um, the, whenever you're going for a divorce, it is a financial transaction. It literally is. It's so, and that was one of the things that I brought to my second husband, is I said, look, are you really wanting to go down this road without giving it some kind of effort? Because it does mean alimony. It does mean we didn't have children, but child support is involved with it. Do you really want to put your children through that kind of thing? Is it now? I will say that there are some cases with, abuse and things like that, that, but if you're going for divorce, you've got to realize it is a it's a financial division of assets. And just because the law states what it should be doesn't mean it has to be that way. because there's plenty of people that can negotiate, but if you can't negotiate, then it falls into what the court will say. And you certainly don't want to get to the point where a judge decides where your assets go, because the judge doesn't care.
Yeah.
They just don't care. They're like, okay, let's just split it down the bottom, right in half. And if you can negotiate to what's most important, I mean, I learned that when I was going through peace building, right? With like how to negotiate. You've got to figure out what's the most important to each other, and then, use a mediator if you can't discuss it. But yeah, you and that financial hit is not permanent.
Yeah. Yeah. The stats bear this out. If I remember correctly, women initiate 70 to 80%
Yep.
of divorces. Um, why do you think that is? Why are women leaving marriage altogether?
That's a really, really good question. My husband now and I have had this conversation multiple times. My personal opinion is, I think, gosh, how do I answer this? I think women tend to be more researchers. Men tend to fear divorce more because they know that they're financially, it's going to cost them a lot of money, because they're typically, I'm not saying this is, every situation, but usually the man is the higher earner in the family. And so there's a lot more at risk financially for them. And um, the women possibly see that as a way out. And some women obviously take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And is it sometimes too that one of the things as well I've noticed about just people is people can be very impulsive,
Mhm.
and feelings are fleeting. They come and go. One minute you're happy, one minute you're sad, then you're excited, and then you're angry. Like it's
Yeah,
fleeting. Like you're not going to stay there in that very moment forever.
yeah,
And is it because sometimes women can be a little bit impulsive because they internalize everything through feeling? Sometimes they say to themselves, this isn't what I want. I'm not feeling it. I'm really unhappy. And then maybe a month or two later, once the divorce is finalized or however long it takes, then they regret their decision. I should have stayed. Have you noticed that at all with
yeah.
regret?
That definitely could be the case. Um, and it's interesting. I was talking to a lady the other day that said that there was a gal, I think she had 4 kids or something, and she impulsively left her marriage and divorce and decided she wanted to go to Europe to just find herself, right? Um, and it took her about a year and a half for her to cycle back through and go, you know what? I made a big mistake. And that is like absolutely destroying the man, right? Um, and in between my first and second um, marriages, I dated quite a few men and heard story after story after story of these good men that were like, look, I tried to love these women. And in my first marriage, I'm very open about this, but I was very overweight. I was struggling with my own internal demons and my low self-esteem, and he just wanted to love me. And I wasn't allowing him to love me. I mean, because no matter what he did or said, it didn't penetrate to me. I mean, it didn't sink in. And so everything I did was projections onto him. And I'm not saying he wasn't abusive to me, but we actually did a interview, because I did radio right after I got divorced from him, and he agreed 3 years after our divorce to do a show with me, which is like, people are like, what? He was remarried at that time, and we talked a lot about the fact that, and these men that I was meeting would saying, Becky, if a woman doesn't love herself, it's near impossible for us to love her. And I was like, that is exactly how I was my first marriage. I mean, no matter what he said or did, it just didn't sink in with me. And so I created a lot of chaos and became abusive to him. And in I also see, though, that these men that say to me, well, I didn't have any idea that she was planning on divorce. And all of a sudden one day she just says she wants a divorce. And I'm thinking, okay, so let me just ask you a question. Like, tell me her biggest complaint. And they would tell me, and I'd say, well, how long has she been complaining about that? Well, 20 years, 25 years. And I'm like, look, here's the situation. That's like your check engine light's been going off for 25 years and you've been ignoring it. You put the duct tape over it, and all of a sudden now your engine block has blown. Because once a woman makes a decision after she's complained about it for so long, she's not coming back. That's it.
Yeah.
Like she's out. And these men are like, wow. And so I also tell men, be careful and listen when there's a squeaky wheel with a woman. We have a certain threshold. I'm patient until I'm not. So it's an interesting space that I'm in because I see, and I don't like the victim because we all both have responsibility. We teach people how to treat us. So, however, I do genuinely know that there's some breakdowns on both sides.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I've read somewhere or just I've heard that women tend to mentally check out of the relationship or marriage months or years on
Oh,
end. The thing about it is men and women are biologically different.
yeah.
And I've told my girlfriend this, like men you kind of have to dumb it down. So if
Mhm.
something's wrong, you need to speak up because we're not
Mhm.
mind readers. We don't
Right.
know. Is that part of this disconnection that women aren't able to sort of express their discernment, their apprehension or worry? Because sometimes I think men we respond differently. We try to anticipate and adhere to the woman's needs, but sometimes it's very difficult. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
women need to really just open their mouth and say, look, this is what I'm feeling. Because men, if you notice, are problem solvers. We want
Yep.
to fix everything. Like, we want to make sure everyone around us is happy and thriving. And if
Mhm.
something's wrong, we will go above and beyond to fix it. And I think sometimes women struggle with this. They struggle to sort of ask the question or say, look, this is what I'm feeling. You know, how can we rectify this? But have you noticed that? Have you found out that women do struggle with that and, expressing what their discernments are?
Well, yes and no. So here, I'll give you an example. My second husband was a former police officer, and there was one day that I was feeling a lot of emotion, right? So I brought that emotion to him. I teach this actually in one of my workshops. It's called Woman Up. I haven't taught it for years, but I brought this concern. I don't know what it was that day. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of this like emotional outburst that I had, I turned to him and I said, do you feel like I'm waterboarding you? Like, he's like, I have no idea what's happening right now. Like, I mean, and I think sometimes us, because we have so much more emotion, that men don't know how to navigate through that. And I honestly believe that men are scared in some sense because they're like, what do I do with that? And I love that there was this gal that I was listening to that dealt with relationships, and I tell people to do the same thing. Is as a man, when a woman is highly emotional and having one of those days where we just need to verbally throw up, and get it all out, instead of trying to fix it, you just imagine you have a garbage can in front of you and you just, what else, honey? What else? What else? And
Oh,
you put
wow.
it in that garbage bag. You don't put it on your back. You don't try to solve it. And there was a really, really good friend of mine many years ago, and he was brilliant at this. Is when I would start verbally like, he's like, okay, wait, stop, Becky, hold on. Do you want me just to listen, give you it? walk you through it and kind of help you through it, or do you want me to solve it? And that immediately grounded me in that moment. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, you know what? In this moment, I just need you to listen. And so then the guy can have the garbage bag out there, keep going, keep going, keep going until she's complete. Now, I always tell the men that doesn't mean you don't open up your ears and still listen to what she's saying, because we can tell if you're listening or not.
Mm.
And then you get in trouble, right?
Yep.
However, we just process differently. Men are very practical. And when I was teaching this in my workshops for women, I said, look, go find somebody, um, another girlfriend, to process a lot of really highly emotional stuff, and then bring the more logic to him, because we just communicate differently.
We do.
Now
Mm.
my husband now is so amazing at communicating. Now sometimes he'll be like, okay, too much. Like, you're over communicating. Where that's not what he experienced in his last relationship. He appreciates that communication, but it's again being patient and holding that space, to recognize that we are different beings in communicating, and saying, hey, that's too much, or how can I best support you? Um, and not because you hear it all the time everywhere, is that we don't need things solved, but coming in those moments with that grounding exercise
Yeah.
will change everything, because
Yeah,
it
that's
makes you take responsibility. It takes me take responsibility for what I need in that moment.
Yeah, that's a very interesting and very thought out way, because I think a lot of men do struggle with that, don't they? Is their
Mhm.
partner might be in a bit of a predicament, and they want to solve it, because that's what men do. We want to
Mhm.
fix everything. We want to
Yeah.
solve things. But it's interesting. Yeah, you're using that analogy with the trash can, but yeah, so what were the questions that men should ask? So if they have their partner coming to them, they're feeling very upset, things are a little bit on the edge, so run me through the questions again. So what are the
Well,
questions they
I
need to
I would
ask?
immediately ask her and say, "Look, sweetheart, I first of all, women need security, right?
Yep.
So I'm here. I can see that you're upset. Um, I want to support you. How can I best support you? And do you need me just to listen to help you solve it, or do you need me just to solve it?" Right? Which is usually never the case,
No.
just so you know. Um, And so, yeah, it's just, and it's creating that safe space, because that's where real true connection and trust is built in a relationship. The minute we lose, where you're like, look, I don't have time for this. The other thing that I would probably bring up is to study the 5 love languages, because everybody's different with how they respond to love. So
Mm.
my husband now, it's quality time. And I learned that right off the bat with him. Physical touch is a huge one for me. If I'm in one of those crazy moments where I'm feeling a lot of emotion, I just need him to hug me and say, I love you and you're going to be okay. And
Mm.
that immediately, like, so everybody's separate, but the important thing is to ask the right questions and put the responsibility of those emotions back on her,
Yes. Yeah.
because she needs to identify what she needs in that moment. And if she says, I don't know, then you can say, well, if you did, what what would that look like? Because I'm here, I love you, I'm not going anywhere. Another thing that I found works is to say, look, I'm on your team. Like,
Mm.
we're I'm not here. I, so those are all conflict resolution things. Help me understand. That's something else you can say. Help me understand how you're feeling, or help me understand what you're thinking about this, or help me understand how you got to that point, going through what you experienced today.
Yeah, it's a hard one to grapple, isn't it?
Mm.
Because we're not taught this stuff in school.
No.
This is things that we have to learn and decipher, as we get older. But what
Mhm.
can women learn about men? What can they do in being able to better, help men understand the way that they're feeling? Because some women just they want men to be mind readers, And, that's very difficult. We don't know there's a problem unless you speak up.
Yeah. And when you speak up, make it so that they can understand that. You know what I mean? Communicate it in a very, because you're very logical. Men are very logical. And ask them, the men, how would you like me to communicate if I have a concern? Give the men the right to express what they need in that moment
Mm.
too. Because it really, relationships, it's not my job. I remember my nephew came to me when he was getting married, and I turned to him and I said, just so you know, you are the icing on the cake. You're not the cake. And he goes, what? I said, it's her happiness is her happiness. It's her job to make her happy. You're the icing on the cake. So, um, meaning that, and I tell guys all the time when you're dating, I'm like, look for a woman who knows how to regulate herself
Mm.
emotionally. Because if she doesn't know how to regulate, then she's always going to point the finger at you and blame you. Because we, I mean, in a relationship, it's so vitally important to take responsibility. Like if I have a bad day, I'm having a bad day. It's not about you. I'm, I might have got snippy. I'm sorry. So here's another example. Interesting enough, when I got divorced from my first marriage, the very first date that I went on, this guy took me dancing, and I love dancing. That's how my second husband got me, because he was a dancer. And I went on this date, and we were the only ones on the dance floor, because he took me somewhere, I guess, that he always went. And I remember he started stepping on my toes accidentally. And I took my hand and put it on his elbow. I looked him in the eye and I said, "You're doing a great job." And you could just feel all the tension, like he was like nervous and all that stuff. And I said, "Wouldn't that be great if we could do that in relationships? We start relationships off with forgiveness in advance.
Mm.
We are going to step on each other's toes. And instead of going, 'Hey, you stupid idiot, you just stepped on my toe,' which some people do in
Yeah.
relationships, they just go, 'You know what? You're doing a good job. And how can I support you?'" Like it's in the ways that we communicate, and really how we view the other person, and the forgiveness that we give them. So I think, and and like I said, I think understanding the basics of men, that you don't overwhelm them with too much information. Like we just are very different that way, with the way that we communicate, and we'll communicate in circles, where men don't typically do that. Just give
Yeah.
us something to shoot for, and we'll go there.
Yeah. And,
Yeah,
and even too, Becky, like men are a little bit confused in the dating world right now
absolutely.
because women still want men to approach. There in the olden days, what women used to do is if they wanted a man to come over to talk to them, they would drop a handkerchief, and that was
Yeah.
like cue for them to pick it up and hand it back to them. In obviously 2025, modern dating is a little bit different to back in those
Hmm.
days. But one of my friends, I was having a conversation with her, and she was, there's a guy that she kind of likes. And she said, "What should I do?" And I said to her, "Treat him like golden retriever vibes." So, in the sense, don't give very subtle, obscure cues. Make it
Hmm.
more obvious, because you kind of have to dumb it down for guys.
Yeah.
We get very confused, like and especially with the Me Too movement.
Yep.
The
Absolutely.
Me Too movement was important, but unfortunately, it's completely sterilized the way that
Mm.
men and women interact in the world.
Yep.
Men are afraid of approaching a woman because they don't want to be another Johnny Depp Amber Heard case.
Yep. Yep.
So we're terrified of going over to approach someone. We're thinking, "Oh shit, should I go? Should I not?" We don't know. So that's a little bit of a difficult one to grapple as well. But what have you come to learn about divorce and how men and women, processing everything financially, emotionally, who has a harder time? Is it men? Is it women? Is it both? It depends on the circumstances. What have you learned about that?
Okay, so before I get into that, I want to address what you just said,
Yep.
and I'll give you an example of something a woman could do. I remember sitting next to a man, and we were actually at church, and someone was getting up talking about dating and stuff. And this was a guy that I was, I had some interest in. I wanted to get to know him. And I turned to him and I said, just so you know, if you asked me on a date, I would say yes.
Ah,
And I mean, within a couple of weeks, I started dating my second husband. But my point is that give him a bone, right? Like give him some sign and be direct and just say, just so you know, if you'd asked me out, I would. And then he did come back to me. He's like, I was going to ask you out, Becky. I'm like, well, but but anyway, I just wanted to address that because they need to be clear. That's a way of doing it that's not like, hey, when are you going to ask me out? Well, guy doesn't like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like somebody hunting and whatever they're hunting is coming straight up to you. You know what I mean? Like, that's no fun.
yeah.
The guys need something, but give them something to indicate, hey, I'm interested in you. I really would like to get to know you better.
Did
Um,
you hear that the stats bear this out? 86% of women say that they want a man to make the first move, and a different study suggested that 50% of men are afraid of making a move on a woman for being seen as creepy.
Absolutely. And this is what I always say, and this applies to sales and whatever else, is that you can't say the wrong thing to the right person. And you can't say the right thing to the wrong person.
Mm.
So, I mean, all of these things out there going, you have to say the right thing. You have to have all these lists. You have to, what's your non negotiables? And those things are important. But to the right person, there's nothing you can do that's going to change the outcome of the relationship because just the way you are with all your imperfections and your strengths, they're going to want to be with you. I mean, I remember one guy said to me once, he says, Becky, you're too much. Like, you're really intimidating. Like, I'm like, well, then you're not my right guy. Like, I mean, the right guy that I want to be with is someone who's going to think amazing things about me. And that's what my husband is now. He's like, Becky, I'm like, are you like, because I've been in other relationships that I haven't. I mean, I'm like, are you sure? Because I'm like having a bad day. He's like, I love you. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing I can do wrong. Does it mean that we get frustrated sometimes? Absolutely. But my point is just be you, be comfortable in your own skin. And you can also be that way in a good relationship where you're both putting the effort into it, you know?
Mm,
Because
yeah.
but to try to be somebody that you're not and going, "Oh, I said the wrong thing." Well, you know what? It just wasn't the right fit.
Yep.
Like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to spend my whole life trying to prove myself. I've already done that twice before, by the way. So
Yeah.
it doesn't work, nor trying to change that person. It's no. And that's what my response was to my second husband when he said I had no value. I mean, it's like there's nothing I can say or do that's going to change your opinion of me. I know who I am
Mm.
and
Yeah.
the value. So thank goodness I found somebody that sees that even more so than I do myself sometimes. So I tell people don't worry about that. Just be yourself and let the other people see you. And so that's actually another thing. There's a book that I wrote many years ago. It never got published, but it's called Love Like a Lady because it was all these men that I had dated that told me these stories over and over and over again. And L stands for being loving and kind because these men were like, man, we're scared to death of all the criticism that comes from these women. And I was like, well, be loving and kind. Notice what the men are doing, not what they're not doing.
Mm.
Because I was horrible at that in my first marriage. And this A stands for be appreciative. Tell them, hey, I appreciate that you noticed that. I appreciate that you listened. I appreciated that you took the trash out. I appreciated that you played with the kids or whatever it is that they do. Have your eyes always open and be like, hey, I saw that. you know, I thank you for doing that. Um, LED is be desirable.
Mm.
If, you know, there's a lot of beautiful women out there, but they're not desirable, right? Like, it's not like you look across the room and go, wow, I want to be with her because I'm seeing her being kind to people, or that she's being a leader, or that she's confident, or, you know, be desirable, because that is a different than just being beautiful. Desirable comes from the inside out. And BY, I think LEDY, Y is probably one of the most important things is be yourself. Be comfortable in your own skin. Men are super attracted to a woman who's confident and kind,
Yep.
you know, because there's so much harshness in this world towards men. And the whole Me Too and women's lib has literally demasculized all these men, like you were mentioning.
Yeah.
I'm like, if you want a man to be a man, you've got to be a woman, because they don't want to date another man.
That's true. Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned that, Becky. I think too sometimes women are a little bit confused about what men find attractive, and the
Mm-hmm.
world challenges us. You know, we go into the world and we have to deal with all this, you know, pressure from outside external influence,
Yeah.
and the last thing we need is to fight for more fires at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there is that little bit of disconnection there as well. Yeah. But as I said, they don't teach you this stuff in school. It's very difficult. You have to navigate your way through this whole thing we call life.
Well, or go through lots of relationships, and I don't look at my relationships as failed, my divorces, because they taught me who I am today. I mean, I learned through, and I did, especially between my first and second, I did a lot of self-development work, and 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 really needed to take responsibility for what I created,
Mm.
so that
Yep.
I didn't do that again. And so I think that's really an important thing. Anytime you are in a relationship, or you've exited any kind of relationship, to really look at, okay, what was my part? You know, how can I become better through this and grow into the next relationship? And I think that's actually one of the reasons why my second husband was so intrigued by me, is because I learned how to be so appreciative of everything, and he just was eating that up. Like, um, and and I think that was the happiest he's ever been, in my personal opinion, is
Yeah.
during that time, because I saw in him what I could see as a potential, but it wasn't my job to. I mean, that's another thing that I think women can do for men is, I remember somebody came up to me one time and said, Becky, do you ever play chess? And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, do you know what the role is of the queen in chess? Have you ever played chess before?
A long time ago, but I know the analogy where you're going to come from with this. Yeah.
Yeah. So the analogy was that he's like, you know that the queen protects the king, right? And I'm thinking there going, how does the queen protect the king? Because the king, I mean, men typically are the protectors physically of women. And I really dug deep into this concept that the queen protects the king, because one of the things is, when you're in a relationship with an authentic man, like a real man, the men that are out there protecting, that love with all their heart, good men, solid men, the one thing that they need protected is their emotions and their inner dialogue, because they can go out there, and my husband and I have talked about this too, is he goes, I'll go out and conquer the world, but I want a soft space to come home to. I'm probably going to cry about it, because it's so important
It
for
is.
us as women to understand that when a man opens that part of him to us, which really connects us to them, we need to protect that so much. And to knowing that these men, I'm not going to just go out to all my girlfriends and tell them all the secrets and everything that this man has told me, because he goes, I just need a soft place to come home to.
Yeah. That's one of the things too, Becky, is a lot of men struggle to open up to their romantic partner because there's been countless forums I've read online and have heard multiple stories of men say that they opened up to the romantic partner and then a few months later it's been used against him and weaponized against him in a future argument. The rule is never cry in front of your romantic partner, never show any ounce of vulnerability or chink in the armor. And who does a man want to talk to about their problems? Is
Right.
they're the romantic partner. Now, I'm not saying regurgitating and being overly emotional, but if it's a serious thing, like he's financially on the brink of a breakdown, or, maybe there might have been a death in the family, and he sheds that tear, and then you use that against him in a future argument, women only get one shot with a man's vulnerability. One.
110%.
Yeah,
And
one.
and I know that because my first husband, I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to just, all these things I didn't like about him, I was going to change him. And I'm a singer. And I remember one time I was playing the piano and he was singing, and I turned to him and I said, "You have a horrible voice." And this is a man who's like taken singing lessons for years, wanting to learn how to sing. He would never sing in front of me again. And that is so true. I love that you brought that up, is because women don't realize that. I think men, my personal opinion, I think men are way more sensitive emotionally than women are. We can be catty, get over it, and get on with things, but men, especially when it comes to a woman that they trust. And so when I started dating after my first divorce, that was my number one priority, is when I would go on a date with a man, is to do everything I could to create a safe space for them to open up. And I can't even tell you how many men started crying in restaurants with me. And I never shamed them. I said, look, you're just as emotional, if not more emotional than women are. The problem is that society does not support that emotion.
No, no.
And there's nowhere really for them to express that, but in a relationship of trust. And it does a number on these men, especially when they go into getting to another relationship. It's like, am I safe? Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I only can reflect on one relationship where I actually cried in front of my partner, and she loved me more for it.
See?
There are women out there that will hold space, but it does become very, very tricky because unfortunately, the majority of forums you read online, you hear about these men that have opened up to their partner, and their partner said, man up, don't be a baby, get your shit together. How is this going to affect
Nope.
the family? And a lot of women do this. They will put the onus on men, and they won't create a safe space. And if you think about what a man's role is, it's to provide and protect. And I
Yep.
think women can learn how to protect their man emotionally, keeping a safe space, because I think women are getting a little bit better with this. It's just that I think
Hmm.
there's a little bit more work to do.
Well, and again, if it's the right person, they'll hold that space for you. And if they've done enough work within themselves, because I've come a long way. I mean, my husband and I have talked about this, that had we met earlier on in our lives, I may not have been this person in this relationship, for him. Because I had to go through my own journey, right? And a lot of men that I would date would be like, "Well, Becky, you sound just like my ex-wife, and somehow you've come through it." And I said, "Well, I've done a lot of work on me." Because so that's why when you're looking to be in a partnership with someone, and especially long term, it's so vitally important that you look for someone that can take responsibility for themselves and that have that kind of language. And it doesn't mean that I still don't be like, get frustrated. But in the end, I can go, wait a minute, hold on, let me back up. That I was triggered here. I had this response. That wasn't about you. I'm sorry. Let's recover. Because that kind of stuff, that's the process that you have to go through in order to repair some of that. Um, and still
Yeah,
holding a space of trust.
yeah. To
Yeah.
the women that will listen to this, what would be some advice to them on better navigate a man's emotions? Like if a man is going to open up, and even to the point where that man might even shed a tear, and how can they create a safe space? Like, what would be some advice to these women to help their romantic partner?
I would never shame is probably one of the biggest culprits in shutting anybody down. So a man that sheds a tear, and that's what I don't think men really realize, that when they cry because they think you have to be tough all the time. That is when a woman can connect with a man on that level, like that connect. I mean, that's just how we communicate. So how does a woman create that space? Is like, here's an example. One of the guys I dated many years ago, I told him, I said, look, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, won't change the fact that I love you. And that just that verbiage alone gave him just completely put all the barriers down. And he's like, okay, Becky, this is how I feel. I'm like, okay. So communicating that we're on the same page, we're on the same team. I'm not here to judge you. I'm I can see that, and I can, again, same communication. I can see that you're frustrated and that this is really upsetting to you. Tell me more,
Yeah.
and trust that I know that and also verbalize to the men that I won't be going and telling anybody else about this, because I think that's a huge fear of men. That's like, oh, all my stuff's going to be all over the place. And it's going to go to all the girlfriends. They're going to know all this intimate details of my inner workings, you know? But you do it through action, and you do it through communication, and you do it through, your come from. I love that question. I haven't really put that into terms like that, but I had more amazing conversations and dates with these men. I always said to him, though, if I have to counsel you, I can't date you. If I have to coach you, I can't date you.
Yeah.
Because it became sometimes counseling sessions. I mean, not that I'm a counselor, but uh, we'd get into these really long things, and I think they just had never felt as heard as I was intentionally wanting them to feel.
Yeah. I was talking about this on another podcast, and I heard Chris Williamson talk about this. So he said men have to earn the right to express their emotions. For
Mm,
example, the reason why Brad Pitt can cry on camera is because he's Brad Pitt. He's built his value up. He's earned some manly points.
mhm.
He's become this high value man. He's earned the right to express his emotions, even cry.
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting. And I'm thinking to myself, there must be a lot of men out there that are just completely invisible, but at the same token, they're not getting any sort of empathy, because as society says, there's still this stigma, especially with men's mental health, that you need to be hard all the time. And I think that will break a man. If a man is hard all the time and can't express himself, this is one of the reasons why the suicide rate is so much higher in men than it is in women. Um, yeah, it's
I was going
there's
to actually bring that up because I didn't look up the statistic, but I had a man call me once. I was actually selling my grandfather's all of his tools, and this guy responded, and he shared with me that he was going through a divorce, and we kind of created for some reason, a lot of men reach out to me when they're going through the divorce. uh, Over the years, I've coached a lot of men through that whole process, but he would keep in touch with me. And one day he called me and he says, Becky, I've spent $150,000 fighting for my 5 kids in the court system. I can't do it anymore. And I'm like, and I didn't have kids, so I couldn't relate. And so I connected him with another friend of mine who had a very similar situation. Well, he did take his life within a couple weeks of that conversation. And and that's not just one person I know, but it can be very daunting to feel like you're losing everything. And not only was he spending a lot of money, but his ex-wife had turned a lot of his kids against him. And guys the it's funny because this is like I'm really an advocate for men. I really am, and for women as well. I see it both sides, but I see that men don't have the support. And maybe this conversation I'm having with you right now is another indication that I need to start this men's group because, yeah, people are taking their lives because they don't see any way out. And these
Yeah.
women, some women take advantage of that and will destroy a man that way.
Yeah, and even too, Becky, like following a divorce, men are reportedly 9 times more likely to take their own life. Um, and what do you think is contributing to this? Is it the courts? Is it just the way the courts favor women heavily in alimony? What have you found out about that?
I think financially it's a massive hit, and then turning the kids against them.
Yeah.
I have a friend that I just talked to the other day. I haven't talked to him for a really long time, but I don't think he has not talked to his kids in 20 years. He's sent emails every single week to them, and they will never talk. And you kind of want to give them hope that at some point their kids are going to, wake up and see the reality of it. But in his situation, they never have. And um, that's a situation that's happening with my husband as well. And I just said, give him time, give him time. They're processing through it. So I think, I think the loss of family, the loss of identity, the loss of financial stability, um, and feeling like it's never going to end, the alimony or the child support, and maybe they don't see their kids. I mean, it is so, divorce is just so tough. And the fact that there's not support for men. They don't have anywhere to go to process through all of this, like, and they also don't know their rights. I know I met a guy many years ago that also had written a book about men in the court system because it does favor women um, a lot. And again, whether you're a man or a woman, I think it's vitally important. I'm about to I'm creating a crash course for divorce right now that, within a couple of hours or a couple of days, you can go through this and learn just about all the aspects that you need to know about when you're starting this process so that at least you're more educated than nothing, you know?
Yep.
Um, and one of the things I really do stress is that this is a moment in your life. It's not the rest of your life. Like just because it's painful, it's temporary. There is this beautiful life after divorce, um, that you just don't know what you don't know. And when you're going through it, you feel like, and this is another probably reason why men are just, that's it, I can't handle it, right? And it might be all those emotions that come up. They don't have the tools like women do, or the tribes, the support. But to being able to give them hope that imagine, and I always do this with people I'm working with, of like, imagine what it would feel like to be in this kind of a relationship. Imagine what it would feel like to to be thriving financially again and to be building this beautiful future that you've always wanted. It just might look a little different with a different person. And so it's keeping people in that forward thinking instead of going back, because you can't change what happened. You just
Yeah.
can't. It's
Yeah.
and it's like a monkey in the forest. You've got to be willing to let go of that branch in order for you to swing forward into and be open enough to be in a relationship. I know when I dropped my second husband off at the airport in Hawaii, I had him served divorce papers at the airport. And there's multiple reasons for that, but it was mainly for my safety. And my prayer to God at that moment when I dropped him off is, God, keep my heart soft, not only to him, but to other men. Because I didn't want to be one of those people that came out of the divorce and and looked at every man as the way that I was looking at him at that point and what I experienced with him, because I knew I had dated enough men to know that there was really good men out there, and I wanted to make sure I came out of it better, not bitter.
Yeah.
And that was a journey. It's a journey to keep the heart soft.
Yeah. What can we change about the laws regarding divorce? If you look at some of the wealthiest women in the world, they got their money through divorce. Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, I think, reportedly got $3 billion or something like that. I mean, not that's going to affect Jeff Bezos, but I've heard of men becoming bankrupt, even homeless, because the courts heavily favor women in alimony. And almost to the point where I think women are even incentivized to leave because they get a huge sum of money. But what do you think needs to change in how we handle divorce? And even too, like, marriage rates are just plummeting. No one's getting married anymore.
Yeah, that is okay. So that's two different issues. So one being my thoughts about what needs to change. I think, in my opinion, people need to be more educated, because the if we get into marriage so quickly and we don't know what we don't know about getting into marriage, and I just put on Facebook yesterday a post that says we don't really truly know people until we divorce them. And that's the sad part, is their true selves really come out with that. But if we both were empowered with the process of because when you get married, it is a transaction. It's a financial commitment. And when you get divorced, um, it is a financial transaction. So I don't know what else to say about that, other than you both need to know, look, what your rights are in getting in and getting out. And it doesn't mean that you can't negotiate it, but there's a reason why you're getting divorced. That's why you have a hard time negotiating things. What needs to change, I would say, I think divorce attorneys and need to be better at educating. They just because you have an attorney doesn't mean that they're going to advocate for you. One of the things I teach people is how, if you are going to hire an attorney, you need to know how to hire them. Don't marry and date the first divorce attorney you meet. You know, it's because not all of them are good. Um, and how to get an attorney to work for you, how to work with an attorney, because they're not sometimes not the easiest to work with. Um, what can you do on your own? What can you, I mean, I had a gal the other day goes, Becky, can I do my own divorce papers? I'm like, yeah, do you know what your name is and your address and how many kids you have? Like, yeah, you don't need an attorney. I did a majority of my case on my own. And people are like, what? I also had a lady come to me. She has 5 kids, 4 attorneys for a 2-year divorce. Her husband sold their multi-million-dollar business that they ran for years after they separated and were in the divorce process, and he kept all the money. And I said, well, sweetheart, did you know he can't do that legally? And she goes, no, none of my attorneys told me that. I said, well, do you know you can subpoena the records so you can get the right information? She goes, none of my attorneys told me that. And I said, he's 2 years in the back rears of child support. I said, well, do you know that you can do a motion to compel? None of my attorneys told me that. I'm like, so uh, people just don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
It's just it's so heartbreaking to hear that couples aren't sticking it out. And
Yeah.
if you look at couples too, Becky, that have been married for 50 years, 60, 70, it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
No. Mm-mm.
It's not. There's going to be times. It's like the tide. It goes out, it comes back in. You're going to have ups and downs, and you need to navigate through those hard times. And I think and reflect on what it would have been like back in those days where men have come back home from war, World War I and
Mm-hmm.
World War II, and how their wives would have been able to support them through those tough times.
Mm-hmm.
And I think right now, I think we are sort of seeping into hard times. There's that saying, hard times create strong men create
Mm-hmm.
good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. I think right
Mm-hmm.
now, essentially, people are going through hard times, and yeah, it's becoming incredibly difficult, and even too for children.
Yep.
We're seeing broken homes, we're seeing more and more children that are now on antidepressant medication, starting to use drugs. What have you found out about the emotional ramifications on children through divorce?
Well, their children feel, right? Because they're seeing and they're modeling and they feel that. So I have years of experience in food addiction, so the addiction process, because that's how I lost my weight is through a food addiction program, 12-step program. And what I realize is most people go to addiction because of un the inability to control stress. So when people go through divorce, kids feel that, right? And they act out, they they bully, they scream, they yell, they hit, there's all kinds of trauma reactions that happen with that. And in our society, again, we live in such a society that's a throwaway. We go to McDonald's, we throw away, what I mean, like drive through. And we're always looking for the easier, faster path. What's the magic pill, so to speak? And and not realizing, and we also live in a really selfish world. We really do. Because people think that, hey, it's the grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah.
And little do you know, you're not paying attention to those little kids that, I think the statistic is 50% of kids that come from divorce end up divorced themselves, right? So, I mean, 50% is anyway, but it's like, and we were talking about the other day, my husband and I going, which one of your kids do you think are going to be the statistic? And it's just like, you know, where are we? And I also want to go back to the point that you brought up is that we've also, I believe, through Disney and all that other garbage, have been programmed to think that romance and Hallmark movies, right? That relationships have to be perfect and hairy fairy and there's no arguing and there's no debating and it's just no, we're two human beings coming together and it's gonna be difficult, but you got to stay in the boat, meaning stay in the relationship. Again, there's abuse, there's situations for abuse, and that's a whole nother thing to navigate. However, the more we divorce, the more we're teaching these kids this is the answer. Divorce is the answer. And I also believe that when a relationship is having difficulties, that the minute the D word goes down on the table, you're now negotiating with divorce. It's like that should never even be a possibility. Like a girlfriend of mine the other day, my husband and I went to go visit a very, very good friend of mine. And I grew up with her. She was my best friend growing up. And she and her husband have struggled with some addiction over the years. And they just went to Hawaii for a week. And she goes, yeah, I told my kids, I don't know if we'll be married by the time we get back. I mean, I couldn't sleep for a couple days. I said to her, I said, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with telling your kids, even though they're grown adults, most of them, that I don't know if your dad and I are ever going to be together. I'm like, that just creates so much instability within your family because there's so many dynamics when divorce hits that you have to deal with. And yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's tough.
I think marriage is one of the most amazing things, and the most beautiful thing on the planet is love, and especially for the family unit. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've read the alarming stats of what happens to children in single parent and broken homes. I
Mm.
know, for example, young boys have it a lot worse than women. They're more likely to be incarcerated in jail, more likely to be drug users, more higher chances of suicide and depression in the
Wow.
future and mental
Yep.
health disorders, more likely to be engaging in gang related violence. Look at some of these tragic mass shootings that happen in America. Some of these,
Hmm.
kids that shoot up the schools come from single parent homes.
Yep.
Um, yeah, it's just really,
And do you think that they're thinking of that when they're thinking about the divorce?
I don't think they are.
No,
No.
no. They think I just want to get out of this. And um, I appreciate you bringing up those statistics because I didn't have children, so I um I personally that's one reason why I referred my friend over to somebody else because I'm like I just want you to go to somebody that can actually relate to what you're going through. But it is true when the broken it breaks up our whole society,
Yeah.
literally.
Yeah, and I think it's heartbreaking. Like in Australia too, Becky, we've had a 30% increase in crime across the country. We have more broken homes than ever. We have, kids as young as 15 breaking and entering. Like I'm on Facebook Watch and seeing all the vandalism and break and enterings that's going on. This is the ramifications
Right.
and consequences that happen from broken homes. You know, education must be a thing that really needs to be implemented. Would you agree? To really try and educate couples to come together and try and really work out how to navigate this whole thing called marriage, especially if there's kids involved. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would venture to say that if people really understood the stats, right, that you just gave, they would think a little bit more about this. Okay, do we want to just end this whole thing or do we want to continue because you've got kids, and that's most. I mean, I know that that's one of the reasons why my husband stuck it out for as long as he did because his former wife was multiple affairs. He's just like, but we had children, you know, and these children, even though they are grown, they're suffering because of it. And
Mm,
so education and going, really, is this really what you want to do? And put our kids at risk. And what's really sad is when people go, yeah, but I don't know if they consciously know. And again, education would help them see that. And that's why, getting in counseling, getting into different programs, helping them communicate better, understanding each other. And really, I mean, I've also seen success stories where people thought they were going to get divorced and they end up getting some help and some education and are able to make it work. So it doesn't have to end in divorce. Divorce is
yeah.
not the solution
Yeah. Yeah.
for most cases.
Did you hear that there was another stat, if I can remember? If a woman makes 56% more money than the man, she's more likely to leave. Women are doing exceptionally well in the workforce. It's amazing that women are in the workforce, and that, they're even out achieving men. And this is obviously this dilemma that's happening in the dating world,
Yeah.
is because most women do want a partner that makes the same amount of money, if not more. The issue that you have is as women climb up through their own hierarchy of competence and excellence, they further shorten down the pool of eligible men. And what you start to see
Interesting.
is more casual dating. So you see high status men that are dating
Mm-hmm.
multiple women because there's a
Mm.
surplus of women and a scarcity of men.
Yep.
But I did hear about that in marriage, that if a woman makes or gets a promotion or something like that, she's more likely to leave the marriage. I
Uh,
did hear as well that a man is likely to use erectile dysfunction medication, which is quite interesting. Did you hear about that?
I haven't heard about that, but I have discussed that.
Yeah.
It's well, on the first thing that you brought up is about women that make more money than their husbands leave. I have heard that so many times that as soon as they get to the point where they're more independent, so to speak, and these men have put them through school, now become more independent, they leave.
Yeah.
Like that's what happened to my husband, right? He's like, I've supported us our whole entire life, and now, you know, and I and we've had this conversation too, because, we've got a business that's going to be quite lucrative. But I make sure that my husband says, I say, look, this is our business. This is not my business and your business. This is our business, because I believe in partnership. But it's so interesting in marriage where people don't think, he's like, oh, I've worked all these years. This is my money. I'm like, no, it's our money. You know, this is just because you make more than he does, it's still equally yours together.
Mm.
So that just tells you one thing right there, that they're not a team. And even in their bank accounts, like I believe in full transparency, and not, I mean, they're everyone does it differently, but I believe in having one account with yourself. I mean, this is like together. This is no secrecy. Um, But yeah, I would say on the second thing that you mentioned about, you know, men having issues, right? Like, as you get older, it's a thing. And if that's what your whole relationship is based on, then yeah, you're going to have some problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the relationship based on?
Mm.
I know of a couple right now that in his 30s or 40s, he could no longer get an erection, and his wife has stayed with him all these years. I mean, look, are you making, like, I'm going to stay with you until or if this happens or doesn't happen? I remember when I was dating many years ago, before I got married the first time, actually, because I've always struggled with my weight. And this guy said to me, he says, I believe it's a deal breaker if you get married and gain weight. It's a deal breaker. I'm like, so, like, what if we got married and you got in an accident and, or paralyzed? Do you want me to leave you? Is that a reason to, I mean, people will find anything that they want to
Yeah.
give them a reason to get out. But how about going way deeper into seeing this person for who they are, not for what they can bring to you,
Yeah.
and that's the society that we live in, is that we literally, it's like we're looking for, what can he do? I mean, I hear so many women that go on a date and they're like, well, he didn't open the door for me and he didn't do this for me and he didn't. I'm like, okay, seriously? Like, you're setting your whole relationship or marriage in the future up for failure if you're looking for what he can do for me. It's what can I do for him? And
Yeah.
in the process, he'll give back. That's the principle all the way through business and everything in life, you know?
Yeah.
I think we're also measuring people on their extrinsic value.
Right?
We're measuring people on how much money does this guy make? Will he be successful in the future? And we're not taking in consideration for who they are as a
Right.
person. We're not measuring intrinsic value. Are they kind? Are they generous? Are they funny? And this
Hmm.
is the shit thing about dating apps is when people go on a dating app, you might have a guy that looks very, very good, like he's a very
Hmm.
attractive guy, but how is he as a person? And then you
Exactly.
might have another individual that's not very attractive, but he might be attractive because he has charisma, charm, he's
Hmm.
generous. These things can't be portrayed through a dating app.
Exactly.
And I think, yeah, a lot of people are very shallow, very shallow. And I think we should
Hmm.
be sort of thinking about, concentrating on, you know, who they are as a person, because looks fade
Yeah.
as you get older. Do you think this is also the problem too, that because we live in this very much social media TikTok world, we become very shallow and forgotten to take people into consideration for who they are as a person?
Well, absolutely. And I think that my experience is men are more hooked on the physical. For women, they're like, well, I'm not attracted to her, and I'm like, where women can be a little bit more generous that way. Um, because we're not as visually stimulated. At least I've found that, and I found a lot of men ended up in relationships with women that are gorgeous, but there's nothing behind it. And I'm like, they're like, well, and they make all kinds of excuses. And I'm like, so that's what I'm saying is the beautiful versus desirable, right?
Mm.
And can you desire? And a lot of men have come to me and be like, but Becky, that's the one thing is just that I'm just not as attracted as I want to be to her. And I'm just like, but is she a good mom? Does she treat, and it's hard. I get it. There's nothing to fault men for that. Um, but it's not the only thing. I also do believe that attraction is important, both for men and women. I mean, I look at my husband every day and I'm like, he is not only from the outside, but I find him incredibly attractive. All aspects of him are attractive. And I let him know all the time because he didn't get to hear that in his marriage. And he never even knew that he was handsome until he got divorced. And he's like, I'm like, are you kidding me? All my girlfriends wanted,
Mm.
like, they're all over you. I'm like, hands off, but he's just a beautiful human being. So attraction is, and actually we went on a walk this morning and I said to him, I said, isn't it interesting how couples get together, what attracts them, but whatever that is, make sure that that's something every day that you keep at the forefront of who you are or who they are in your mind, and not let the stuff, their weaknesses, become clouding your vision and not being able to see them for who they truly are. But I think appreciation is a big part of that. When you appreciate for what they're doing, you see them differently. And if you have a difficulty with somebody, change the way that you're looking at them and they will change.
Mm.
Like, it just is weird how our perception is. But if you want to focus on everything that's wrong with him or her, that's all you're going to ever see.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned, appreciation, and what does a man wanna do more of when he's feeling appreciated? He
Of
wants to do
course.
more.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah, and I think men are starving of appreciation. I've spoken to countless men, and they can't really count on one hand how many compliments they've received from a woman, let alone from anybody. And women obviously receive a lot of compliments. I know some
Mm-hmm.
amazing women, so high achieving women, some attractive women. They receive a lot of compliments, but I think men too. They are starving for appreciation, and
Yeah.
yeah. If you think about, if you have the right woman in your life that guides you, that appreciates you, that gives you respect and love and
Mm-hmm.
admiration, you
Mm-hmm.
watch that man build an empire. Yeah.
110%. I see the effect on and I made that mistake on my first marriage. I really did. Like, I was so young and immature, thinking that the more I brought to the attention of all of his negative features and his aspects, that he would want to change them. Like, that was the stupidest thing I could have done. And the second husband, of course, I was way more appreciative, but what I didn't realize, I was feeding the narcissist. I had no idea that I was fueling that fire. Um, and this one, it's so wonderful to be in a relationship where every day I hear probably 6, 7 times, I love you, I appreciate you. My husband will be like, hey, I'm like, what? He's like, I love you. It's like, thank you, and thank you for taking care of my grandkids. And thank you for this and that. And I mean, and that appreciation, and that, I would say that that is probably one of the secret sauces that women, if they really understood how powerful that one thing is, even if you make it a goal, at least 1 or 2 things a day. Hey, honey, I appreciated that you opened the door for me. I appreciated that you cooked the meals, or that you brought me flowers, or that you do the laundry, or whatever it is that they do. Just find,
Mm.
a couple things a day and see how your relationship will change, because people want to be seen, and men are no different. Like,
Yeah.
men want to be seen for the efforts that you are making. Yeah,
I, I
100%.
I saw this viral video, Becky, on TikTok where a man received a bouquet of red roses on Valentine's Day, which is just unheard of. You never hear of a man
Yeah, yeah,
receiving
yeah.
flowers. I mean, the only time a man will receive flowers is at his funeral,
Mm,
which is kind of sad.
yeah,
Yeah, but I do agree. I think men are really starving for appreciation, and women can be a powerful force if they understand that, guiding a man and helping him on his mission and being a support system and being of his peace, all these things, that man is, I mean, this is the whole reason why we live in this amazing world. I think majority of men on what we've conquered and what we've done it
yeah.
also in the pursuit of women. I truly agree. Everything that
100
you,
I honestly believe that you guys wake up every single morning. I'm going to say good men, okay? Really good, solid men wake up in the morning and they live their whole life. Every single thing that you do is there to support women. Like,
Yeah.
I really do. Women are a little bit different because we have a lot of things in our life. A lot of our attention goes in a lot of different directions. But for men, if women would realize that that is what they are are built, you guys are built to protect a woman. And when a woman gives a compliment, a genuine compliment and appreciation, he's like, ding, like, I'm doing that again.
he
You know what I
wants to
mean?
do
Like,
more.
yeah, he's like, oh, I'm like, oh gosh, honey, I love when you bring me flowers. Ding. And because if you don't communicate it, he doesn't know it. Like, you
Yeah.
guys don't read minds. And so we have to be willing to communicate that appreciation. And it really just speak from experience of what works and what doesn't work now being in a very happily married woman.
Yeah.
I use that all the time and I don't do it manipulatively. I do it genuinely.
Yeah, we do. We vicariously live through other people.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the dad gets a tie for Christmas and he's happy with that. He's more happy making other people happy.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I truly believe
100.
that. And everything that you see around, majority of the world was built by men. And I guarantee we send rockets into space, we've been to the moon and all these amazing things that we've done. We've also done it in the pursuit of women to raise a family in the next generation.
Yeah.
And what greater compliment does a man have than a woman that's by his side? And as you said,
That believes in him.
using that analogy with the chessboard.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good analogy. Yeah. So
Oh,
what do you?
I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a big aha moment for me because it really took me a couple days to really realize like how does a woman really safeguard and I mean how do we protect men? I mean that's just not something that we really talk about in our society. And that's what I discovered. Yeah.
Yeah. How has the shift in gender roles and expectations impacted stability and marriage today? What do you think about that with gender roles?
You mean the typical gender roles where the man goes out and makes money and the woman stays home and how that's
Yeah,
shifted?
it's shifted. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all our economy is also made it so that a one um, income home is not cutting it,
Yeah.
right? So women are having to get out there, and I believe it really has affected the femininity of women for us to be in the workforce because then we feel the pressure of having to provide. That's one of the reasons why I'm founding and starting a company called Only Subpoenas, where I do subpoenas for attorneys and to help people through divorce. But one of the missions I have is as people are coming out of divorce, whether it's men or women who are disadvantaged financially, that they can work for my company, right?
Wow.
And they can do it virtually. And I want 50%. I grew up with a mom that was always home. I came from a family of 5 children, and she was there when we got up in the morning and would make all of our lunches and was always there when we came home from school. Now that's very different sometimes than what we see, but I really want to support mothers being home with their kids when they come home from school. And so 50% of my workforce in this company that I'm building is going to be stay-at-home moms because everything can be done remotely. And so it's we really do need to get back to the basics. And it's and this is the analogy that I always give people in when it comes to male and female roles. It doesn't mean that either one of them is more important. It's I love dancing, so the analogy is the dance of intimacy, where the man, if you watch a professional dancer, that man is on the stage, so to speak, and his job is to create stability and to lead. And if a woman comes on to the stage and tries to lead that relationship or that dance, it doesn't work. If a man actually knows what he's doing, he can lead her around the room with one finger,
That's
because he
so
uses
true.
his middle finger in the back of her back and moves her around the whole room. But he can't move her if she's unwilling to surrender to his masculinity.
Yeah.
And so the point of the man is to showcase the woman's beauty. And the woman, every woman's heart desire, I believe, a real true woman, is to have our beauty acknowledged. Like, we're in this beautiful gown. He's usually in black, right? And so he showcases this beautiful woman, but he can't do that if she doesn't let him do that. And it's like, so when I got divorced the first time, I started dancing all the time. I'd go to the single dance things and dance. And oftentimes I'd close my eyes because I was so masculine dominant in my first marriage, like demanding and all that stuff, that I had to learn to surrender. And I would often close my eyes and just let the man, I mean, I don't know, I'd fall all over the feet sometimes or whatever, but I had to really energetically feel what it felt like to step into that feminine role. And so I think women have to be extra cautious, and men need to be extra cautious in this society now, that we don't lose that, even though we're both in the workforce, that we still have this feminine and masculine energy that we're bringing to each other, and that we
Yeah.
don't cross over that, because men don't want to be married to men.
It's
Typically,
true.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
and women don't want to be married to another feminine energy. That's not why men and women come together.
Yeah, that's so true, and that's such a good point that you made too, Becky. And one of the things that attraction isn't symmetrical; it's asymmetrical. We find attractive qualities in each other through different things. And do you think also that a lot of women do struggle with the word submission and what it means? And a lot of women do struggle to embrace their femininity and don't realize that their femininity is a superpower. It's their strength.
110%. I'll tell you, when I was overweight, I was very masculine. I never felt feminine, ever. And so, of course, I was coming from a masculine, like a very masculine world. And I lost my weight, 130 pounds, during the end of my first marriage. And I don't think my husband knew how to like handle that, right? Like, all of a sudden, I never felt beautiful. And all of a sudden I was coming into this beautiful self, and I was getting attention from men. And when I started dating again, there was men that were um, running to open the door for me. And I'm like, what the heck? And, and, and I was having to look in the mirror and go, look, I'm the same person. However, I just look different. I'm being treated differently. And so I did a lot of mirror work, and I had to do a lot of feminine releasing. And I 110% believe what you just said is women who have, let me just say, beauty, okay? Because not every, I should say outward, that we put on that, right? Like, you have the body, you have the whatever. There is, it can be used to manipulate people. And I started feeling that way. I'm like, wow, people are paying attention to me more. They're paying attention to what I say. I can walk in a room and heads move. Like I went to lunch or I was at the gas station with my mom, and I ended up walking into the gas station, and she's like, did you see those 4 guys just like watch you walk? And I'm like, no, I mean, because I wasn't used to that kind of thing, but there is power. And so women in that, especially if you're attractive or in that way, need to be very, very careful with how we use that power.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
more importantly, it's tapping into that feminine. Feminine power is not push. It's a flow, and it's intuitive. It's soft. It's comforting. It's safe. So it's really an interesting thing what society's done to both the masculine and the feminine energies.
Yeah, I think there's a few things that come into play. You know, I think the family unit is getting destroyed in real
Yeah.
time. You know, this is the fuckery, pardon my
Yep.
French, that we're seeing in the world right now. Broken homes. We're seeing women becoming more masculinized, men becoming more feminine. And also, too, I think the birth control pill might have had a bit of a downfall as well. And a lot of contraceptives get flooded through the water. And
Mm-hmm.
we drink that water, and
Mm-hmm.
also that wrecks our whole endocrine process,
Yep.
our hormones and everything. And men, you know, you're hearing about Harry Styles wearing a dress, and you know, it's just a complete shit show. It really is. Yeah, it's
Well,
so sad.
and here's my opinion about birth control because I never took it. Okay, um, but studies are coming out now that birth control is messing with women, and not even just messing with their cycles, but it's messing with their psyche.
Yep.
And so, and that's another really confusing thing for men because I don't think women half of the time understand why we're feeling what we're feeling, and then men are trying to figure out going, what the heck is going on with you? You know, and look, I was addicted to sugar and flour most of my life, and we don't know what the sugar is doing to our brains. And it's 6 times more addictive than cocaine.
It's so
And
true. Yeah.
and we wonder why people are having a hard time with their health and with their mental state. Because my husband now knows, he's like, look, if I'm on sugar, I'm just not mentally all there.
Mm.
And when I get off sugar, I've been off sugar now for what, 5 weeks again? And it's like my clarity comes back. And it's like, wow, I think more positively about my body image, my self-esteem, everything because of I'm not taking. So we have a lot in our environments that are affecting our inner world. Um, and then we're trying to put that together and figure it out and try to make relationships work. It's like,
Yeah.
uh, a
Have
lot.
you heard that? I've heard stories about women that have been on birth control pill, and then when they come off birth control to try and have children, they
Yep.
find their partner less attractive. They're not attracted to them. Did you hear about that?
I have not heard that.
Yeah, because
That's really interesting.
I think what happens too is women will tend to choose different partners on birth control pill. However, if they're not on birth control pill, I think I heard somewhere that women will choose partners that are more beta type, a little bit kind of feminized men, whereas when they come off birth control, they're more attracted to very masculine men.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that makes sense because that's the nature, right? Like that, like you were talking about earlier, a more masculine man is more attracted to a really feminine woman,
that's right.
right? But if you're altered by a drug, it would alter that's very interesting. I, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about that and I'm like, wow, isn't that interesting? Especially in the 1960s when the sexual revolution happened and, the release of the birth control pill and women obviously coming into the
Yeah.
workforce, these are all the things that are really influencing the whole dating world,
Yep.
marriage the alarming stats. And I'm actually writing a book. I've been writing a book for the last year and a half about the mating crisis. Men and women having a difficult time within dating and
Yep.
relationships, and what it's
Well,
doing
that's
to the
why you
family
have all
unit.
these statistics. I was like, you need to
Yeah.
have your own. I used to be a host of a online dating app. It was a new app that was on, and they hired me to do all these interviews with all the relationship experts across the country. And man, I learned so much. But and it's getting even more and more complicated. It just
Yeah,
is like it.
yeah,
And so I was like thinking, I'm like, he needs to start a dating. Like, I know we
yeah,
talked about dating for a long time, but
yeah.
it 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 matters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what I really do worry as well too, Becky, is we have a declining birth rate. We're
Yep.
below replacement. We're not producing enough kids. Japan went down, I think, a couple of years ago by 600,000 people. They're saying by 2050, China's population of, I think, a billion will be about 600 million. And the argument that people say is, the Earth's overpopulated. We already have 8 billion people. Okay. Well, think about this. If you think overpopulation is bad,
Yeah.
wait till you see underpopulation. And now in Japan, adult diapers are overselling baby diapers.
Whoa. You're kidding
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Oh
going to
my
be like,
gosh.
yeah, it's kind of scary. Like population collapse is kind of scary. And Elon Musk has talked about this. He said, we're below replacement. We need to be producing more kids.
Yeah.
And we're living
Which, of
longer.
course, some people are like, that's so against. But I mean, I don't know where you are, but I'm a God lover and Jesus lover.
Mm.
And I'm like, they're always about multiply and replenish the earth. Like,
Yep.
children are needful. We need the next generation to come and and I grew up at a summer camp for kids. My dad, we owned and operated a camp for 46 years, and kids came from all over the world. And his thing was build a better youth for a brighter future.
Mm.
And so I really do believe that, our future is in children. And, I was never able to have children because of fertility. Had 3 miscarriages my first year of my first marriage. We went through a lot of fertility. Second marriage, he ended up getting snipped right before we got married and refused to go there. And now, hopefully
Yeah.
I'm too old. Someone told me you might get pregnant, who knows? Um, but so I was never able to be gifted with children, even though I wanted so badly these children. And now being a grandma
Yeah.
and seeing how precious these little ones are, it breaks my heart that there's people that just, and then there's kids in the world that need a good home,
Yeah.
that don't
Yeah.
get an opportunity to be in a good home. It's just, yeah, you could.
I
That's a
mean,
tough one.
people could adopt 100%,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's biology at play. When you have children of your own, all these chemicals that get released and the love bonding
Yep.
hormones and things like that. There's also an alarming stat: 45% of women between the ages of 25 and 44 will be single and childless by the year 2030. This was a study from Morgan Stanley, and they're so
Mm-hmm.
certain of this. They did this research on Morgan Stanley so that their investors would know what to invest in, like boxed wine and cat toys, and what obviously, people would do if they were
Right.
single. But
Mm-hmm.
get a load of this. It's even worse for men, and I talked about this on another podcast. Childless single men in society tends to be the most unstable. So men that don't have a
Yep.
reason to behave will commit violent crimes, have a lack of purpose, and
Yep.
be unable to contribute to society meaningfully.
Yep.
And this is, I think, the problem that we're having in the dating world and marriages and relationships
Mm-hmm.
is men and women becoming adversaries. And that's not what we want to do. We want to come
Yep.
together because we
Yep.
complement one another.
Yep.
This is why I think, you're getting this backlash from men, and men are obviously going overseas now because of the passport bro movement.
Yeah.
They're going to these countries to find more traditional feminine women, and
Hmm.
we've got a lot to learn to try and recorrect this imbalance. Because the fertility rate shows, and also too, Becky, like I watched this documentary called Birth Gap.
Mm,
And I haven't really cried since my dad died. And I
mm,
watched this documentary. Above 80% of women who aren't mothers did not intend to not be children. So, in other words,
wow.
involuntary childlessness.
Hmm.
Around about 10% of women are incapable of having kids due to
Hmm.
biological reasons.
Hmm. Hmm.
Another 10% is just because of choice. They don't want to have kids, but then that leaves a whopping 80% of women. And they have support groups for these women around the world where they come together and they grieve for the families that they never had.
Yep.
That you can actually go to a group and grieve about a family that could have been prosperous and,
Yep.
thriving. And fuck, my heart breaks for these women, you know? It's
Well,
so
it's
sad.
I felt it. You know what I mean? I wanted to be a mom my whole life.
Yeah.
I was actually voted in high school to have the most children. And so when I had 3 miscarriages in 1 year and then couldn't have kids after that, I mean, it was a lot of grieving for many, many
Yeah.
years. And what kills me is that, I mean, now I mean, my husband and I were joking about this the other day, and I'm like, "Man, what if because I went to a conference last weekend and met a gal. I said, "What do you do?" And she goes, "Oh, I help people get pregnant." And I was thinking, "What? Tell me more." You know what I mean? Like, that's interesting. And she goes, "Yeah, they freeze their eggs and all this stuff." And I told her my story, and she says, "Well, Becky, be careful because when women are going through menopause, there's usually one last surge, you know, um, that people get pregnant in their 50s." I'm like, "Oh man, like that's you know what I mean? Like I'm to that point where I'm like, I don't know if I could do a newborn." And and so we've had this conversation lately, but I had to kind of get to the certain point where it's hard for me to watch kids being abused or people who are able to have a lot of kids and don't take care of them. I'm like, are
Yeah.
you kidding me? It always seems like the ones that want them the most can't have them. And adoption was definitely an option for us, um, for, at different stages of my life and things like that. But, uh, you know, uh, I have to just surrender that my life is what it is and it was the way it was supposed to be. And, and now I'm in a beautiful relationship we've got all these beautiful grandkids and um so it's yeah, I get it. And it's
Yeah.
hard because society even will put a lot of pressure on couples. They'll be like, "When you having kids?" And you're like, "Can you please just stop? Because we're doing the best we can and it's not yeah, it's just tough."
Yeah, it is tough times for everyone.
Yep.
One final question, Becky, for anyone that's listening to this conversation, and what would be some advice to better navigate their way through the possibility of a relationship, or let alone a divorce? What would be some advice to couples that could be listening to this conversation?
If they've decided divorce is the option, you mean?
Uh, yeah, let's
I
do
was
that
gonna
one.
say, I would first say if there's any chance of saving a marriage, do it. Divorce is not a solution. Okay. I it's a solution when it has to be, and when divorce ha- is inevitable that it's going to happen, you've got to educate yourself on the process and what your rights are and what his rights are, or either or, find out what your rights are and understand, reach out to I mean, that's what I do is I'm focusing more on in my practice or not practice, but in my coaching is I'm focusing on teaching people their rights so that
Yes.
they can have a fair and equitable division and do it whilst keeping your heart soft for the process, because it's really hard. You'll have days where you'll cry, you'll have days that you'll yell and scream, and you'll have days that you wish it was different, and that, I mean, your whole dreams are falling apart in front of you, but knowing that that is something that is temporary and that you'll make it through it, you're going to be okay. There's a lot of people who have survived divorce, and if you feel like you can't make it through, like we've talked about with the suicide, then reach out for help, because there are people, family members, friends. That's one of the first things I tell people, is that you've got to get your tribe of people around you so that you have someone to call it to in the morning. Um, and don't just rely on one person, because people will tap out. They'll get tired of hearing about it. And I had a couple friends in this last divorce that just tapped out. They're like, that's it. I can't,
Yeah.
because especially if it's a high conflict divorce, um, it doesn't have to destroy you. It really, it's like bodybuilding. You're into bodybuilding, right? We have to look at, I mean, we don't have to. My suggestion is that you look at this opportunity of divorce as a new start, and you look at it as resistance. It's just like if you're going to build a muscle in the gym, you gotta you gotta put resistance to that
Yes.
muscle, and it's going to tear, it's going to hurt, and then there's going to be a time of recovery, and you're going to come back stronger. But you've got to give yourself time to grieve through that, go through that, get the team around you, educate yourself. And that's why my program's called Divorcing Strong, is I want you to come through that strong, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially strong. Even if it means that, yeah, we've got to make some divisions, but it doesn't have to destroy you. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Becky, some important topics and a really important discussion.
yeah.
Thank you so much. But where can people find you, Becky, and your program? Talk a little bit about your program.
Yeah, so what I'm offering is that I do something on a weekly basis. I'm just about ready to start it. It's called The Gathering. And that is a weekly support group where you come in. It's super safe, very confidential, because I realize that people need a place to vent, and not vent in a way that's victim, right? Like, there's a way of sharing that's not staying in victim, because you're never going to move past it. So that is a weekly support group that I'm going to be putting together. And also, because I grew up at a summer camp, I'm putting together divorce camp.
Wow.
And I know, isn't that funny? Like, my friend brought that up to me last week. She goes, Becky, why don't you run these divorce camps where you bring people back to the basics? They
What
get
do
to
you do
connect.
there at divorce
Oh,
camp?
I'm going to teach them about the legal system. Again, I'm not an attorney, can't give legal advice, but I can at least teach you about the process. I
Yep.
also help get people situated with a strategy so that they can move confidently through their divorce. And this is right now just for women, the divorce camp. I might do eventually one for men. I'm actually looking into doing some ropes courses, because I think ropes courses build confidence.
Yep.
And I mean, I've done so many of those, and I want that to be an anchor of, like, even though you're going through one of the most difficult times of your life, you can still draw upon your strengths. And you do have that light in there and that strength. You can do this. And I'm also going to, in those camps, create communities of support, so that when they go back home for the year-long program, I'm going to have people support each other through that, and then hopefully come back at the end of that program to circle back around, support them on the next chapter of their life.
No, that's amazing, Becky.
Oh,
And will there be the possibility of doing some men's work as well, helping
yeah.
men, especially too with these alarming suicide stats we're seeing in men?
100%. And my husband doesn't know it yet, but he's a coach. Don't tell him. Like, this is definitely not his world, right? I asked him if he would want to come on this podcast, and he's like, no, 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 Becky, you can share my story, but no, I don't. But because I think there's power in men supporting men.
100%.
I would, I have had a lot of men come to me, and I'm happy to support them. However, um, so I'll cry again because I've just, because I think the men come to someone like me because they want to feel heard and they want to feel validated, um, and they want to feel safe. So I think that there's value with me working with men, but at the end, it really is men strengthening men.
Yeah.
And until my husband could get to that point, or I could bring in, I actually do have another person I can bring in. But yeah, if I have enough interest, if people reach out to me and say, "Hey, I want to be a part of what you're doing," and then absolutely, I would create it, um, because I believe in men. I'm a men lover.
Yeah.
So I through everything I've been through, I'm not a man hater. I really do appreciate what men bring to this world, um and the value. And I want to see men rise to that, to who they really are,
Yeah,
because
likewise.
we need that.
We do. Likewise, I really do. And you know, we men and women complement one another. We're a team. We come together. We shouldn't be combative towards one another.
No.
And I think that's what's happening. We need to turn down the volume of conversation towards each other.
Yep.
You know, saying this is what you're not doing, and you're not doing enough of this. I need a man that's 6 foot tall and makes over 600K, and you know some of these delusional standards, and obviously men subscribing to OnlyFans and giving just
Right.
constant
Yep.
validation and attention. But we need to take it back to basics, and we need to work together because when men and women together, we're a powerful force.
110%. And we
Yeah,
deserve to be in those kind of relationships and feel connected, because that's what we were created for. We
Yes.
really were created for that connection. And I always say we both need to put, the female and the male need to put the weapons of war down and start embracing the, even though we're different, but embrace the differences, because that is what makes us whole.
100%, Becky. Becky,
Oh,
it's been amazing chatting to you.
thank
So
you.
you're on Facebook. So yeah, so
Yes.
Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Is that correct?
So it's Divorcing Strong with Becky on Instagram, Divorcing Strong on TikTok. I just opened up an account, so there's not a whole lot on there, but the main one is Facebook. So Becky Sampson, um, on Facebook, and then BeckySampson.com is my website.
Amazing, amazing,
So,
Becky. Thank you so much. It's been a
oh,
fantastic conversation.
you are so welcome, and good luck with your endeavors as well. I commend you. I mean, you can obviously tell that you've done your research, and this is something that you're passionate about. So anything that I can do to help you as well.
Amazing. No, thank you, Becky.
Okay, great.